Well, good morning and welcome to Mainline Baits Carp Fishing TV. You join me at Bakers Lake at Embryo. I'm still here. I've already done a little video covering my 5 top tips for fishing in weed. If you haven't seen it, there's a link below. But seeing as we're having a few bites, we're going to stay a little bit longer and also going to give you my 5 top tips for using pellets. What a way to start though, eh? Right, tip number 1 for you, and like all of these tips, there's nothing revolutionary, but there might just be a few little ideas that you can put into your own fishing that might help you get 1 or 2 more bites. So first of all, it's no secret that I use the frozen range of mainline baits for nearly all of my fishing. In this instance, I've got some cell and I'm also mixing it with a bit of link, but to help make your bait go further and to help make it more attractive, Mainline do a matching range of response pellet, which is essentially a flavoured pellet to match up with your chosen boilie, just to help make your whole baited area that bit more attractive. Now, I've got to be honest, for over 20 years, I've used the Activate. So even though I'm not actually using the Activate boilie, I've got a real soft spot for that particular pellet. So you'll often find, especially on a water like I'm on today, where you can't use anything other than boilie and pellet, by adding something like this with a little bit more flavour can just enhance it. And let's face it, you know, you might not be wanting to put 5 kilo of boilie out, you might just have 1 or 2 kilos of bait, but you can easily mix it with a couple of kilo of pellet to keep your overall bait bill that little bit cheaper, but it definitely makes it not only go further, but makes it more effective. Well, second bite on what is a very, very hot day, but it's come over a mix much the same as I was talking about during tip 1, bit of boilie and lots of that response pellet. Now what I'm hoping to do is get this one in, move on to tip number 2, which is how you add a little bit of pellet around your hook bait. There are a couple of very easy ways of adding that little ball of pellet or little bit of extra attraction around your hook bait. The first one, the good old funnel web bag. I simply pre-tie a load. I've normally got a few in my bucket of pellets at all times, and if I'm using a spinner rig, just a conventional hair rig, whatever it might be, just hooking on one of these and getting out amongst your spot, even if it's amongst bait you've got out there already, it is without doubt making your hook bait and the area surrounding it all the more attractive. And the more often you think like that and add that to your armoury, I really believe it gets you those quicker bites. Now the second way is actually probably, yeah, I'll probably say my favourite way of doing it in a rig that I use a hell of a lot, and that is the solid bag. Inside there you've got absolutely everything. You've got my rig, you've got the lead, it's tied with the lead to drop off on this instance, but again, once that's out in the water, the bag melts and you have got just the perfect little parcel of bait, with the only thing that becomes edible to a certain degree is your hook bait. A carp comes in, sucks in the whole lot in one go, and hopefully you find yourself attached to an angry carp. Now, before I go on and show you exactly how I tie it, I'm going to include tip 3 in this as well. Now, in order for a solid bag to be as aerodynamic as possible, if you are trying to get those extra yards on your cast, it's important that you've got no little air pockets in there and the bag itself is almost bullet-like and as solid as possible. Now, I use the Mainline spod and PVA pellet, and trust me, it does the job. But when you're looking for those extra yards, I make one tiny addition. I often include some of the response pellets that I showed you earlier, but I put them through my crusher first, because then what you find you get a lovely little pile of crumb, literally pellet crumb, you get little shards and even tinier bits of pellet that already comes in the mix. Now you can do exactly that by, what a lot of people like to do is add a ground bait to their mix to do exactly that, to eradicate those air pockets. Me personally, I prefer crushed pellet, so that's the route I take. Now how do I tie it? That's probably one of the single most asked questions I get through any social media platform, so I'll try and show you here. I simply take one of the small PVA bags. It's the ones that I use for probably 90% of my PVA bag work. I put a tiny little scoop of pellet into the bottom of it first before carefully lowering my hook bait into the bottom corner with my hook laying next to it. Cover that up with another little bit of pellet, and once that's done, I lower my lead on top, bit more pellet, and then using the leader, I gradually tease the lead up through the bag. So what you're doing, you're getting probably the bottom third of the bag has not only got your pellet in, but your hook link is starting to concertina up inside it as well. Obviously that eradicates any tangles, and by the time you're finished, I normally fill the bag about 3/4 full, and then it's a case of really padding it down, getting as tight as possible before twisting up the excess PVA, taking a bit of PVA tape, wrapping it round 5, 6, 7 times before finishing it off with a couple of granny knots. It's then simply a case of trimming those tag ends. As you can see here, I've already trimmed off the final collar of PVA before turning the bag upside down, really being aggressive with the corners, pushing the pellet in, really manipulating it, lick the bags, stretch it, pull it across, hold it down for a few seconds, repeat that on the other side, and that is getting rid of those final bits of air. And because you've got no corners sticking out, it's incredibly aerodynamic and can be cast almost as far as just a lead on its own. There you go, one of my favourites, the solid bag. Now there is another way to get a bit of pellet around your hook bait, but before I tell you, I'm going to get the kettle on. Don't worry, that's all part of it, I don't just want a cup of tea. Right, as you can see, the kettle is boiling, and it's not just for my own cup of tea. I have got here some of the response pellets just put into a little bucket, and what I'm going to do is scald them, because when you do that, once the water's soaked into a bit and cooled down, you've created a lovely little paste that can be put onto a method feeder. So I'm going to give them a soak. Be careful doing this at home, kids. It is boiling hot water. Put a nice amount over them. And all I'm going to do, I'm going to leave that for 20 minutes, half hour or so, let it cool down, and then I'll be able to mould it into a paste, and then I'll show you how you can put it onto a method feeder. Right, let's have a little look, shall we? It's been left in there for 30 to 40 minutes, I suppose. As you can see, you can still see the outline of pellets, but now it is very much a messy old paste. And whilst it is a little bit messy, it is another easy way to put loads of attraction around your hook bait without actually feeding them too much. Simply get a bit in your hand. I've got a bait up method feeder, squeeze it in, mould it around, and then you've got a couple of choices. You can either do as I'm probably going to show you here, and you can leave the bait hanging free. I like to think that that might be the first thing that a carp sees as it comes down, or because once in the water, that pellet is going to break down and come off of that feeder, lots of people like just to press their hook bait and hook in that as well. There's obviously no chance of it tangling. I've got a mega short rig on anyway, and once again, you're almost sort of mimicking your PVA bag presentation without the need for a PVA bag. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, it's not a method I use very often. You do get incredibly dirty doing it, but the last time we did use it, we were out in Texas for monster carp, and this was the absolute winning method to catch those buffalo carp. It's just as effective over here, probably something I should use more. So there you go, tip number 4, scalded pellet wrapped around a method feeder is the perfect way to give you a little parcel of attraction out there without too much actual food. Now, tip number 5 for you. I like to use pellets a lot in my spod mix, but pellets on their own, when breaking down, let off a lovely slick, and you can tell if something's feeding on your spot where a carp or any species of fish might be nudging it, but it's actually possible to sort of accentuate that reaction. Now, the way I do it, before I mix up my main spod mix, one of the first things I do when I get into the swim is put the pellets that I want to use into a bucket, and I give them a real good glazing of hemp oil. Some of it will be drawn in, some of it is just sort of soaking and sticking to the side of it. And when you start putting your bait out, not only do you instantly see some of that slick, but you know that by the time that bait gets down on the bottom, there's not only plenty of those globules attached underneath, so as a carp comes foraging through, you get to see a visual sign when that's happening. Not only that, not only those particles getting caught, but I think it acts like a bit of a chum trail, as if you're shark fishing. That leakage off of the spot, especially like I've got at the minute, where I've got the wind off my back, I've got that lovely trail of flavour going out. I think a carp can certainly help, so they sort of, they pick up on that, come back to your spot, and hopefully, like's been happening so far, you get a couple of bites. Now, I've got 3 or 4 more of these to put out, and hopefully we've got time for 1 or 2 more carp. Now that's a perfect ending, just over 19 pound, a lovely scaly one. And I hope this little video has given you maybe an insight or some ideas exactly how you can make your pellets go a little bit further and add in a couple of new little twists along the way. I really hope you've enjoyed the video, and as long as you have, make sure you give it a thumbs up, turn your notifications on so you know exactly when the next Mainline video's out. And whilst I'm sure all of you watching have, make sure you click the subscribe button, and finally there'll be a few little links up here for some more carpy content.